हेलो फ्रेंड्स। आज का हमारा कोर्स कोड है MPS-002। असाइनमेंट कोड ASST-TMA 2023-24। मार्क्स 100। इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस थ्योरी एंड प्रॉब्लम्स ट्यूटर मार्क्ड assignment. Answer 5 questions in all, selecting at least 2 questions from each section. Each question is to be answered in about 500 words. Each question carries 20 marks. What are the different theoretical approaches to regionalism? Explain. Functionalism and neo-functionalism. Functionalism is a theory of society that is described as static. Neo-functionalism, on the other hand, is a theory developed in mid-20th century by American and Western European scholars in the view of supranational body that is necessary for regional integration. The fundamental difference between functionalism and neo-functionalism is that neo-functionalism specifically study regional integration with European integration as their foremost case in point. However, there are many parallels between functionalism and neo-functionalism in the other respects. Functionalism is a theoretical perspective that views society as a complex system whose parts work together to promote solidity and stability. It emphasizes the interdependence of social institutions and their functions in maintaining social order. Neo-functionalism is an extension of functionalism that focuses on the role of supranational organization in promoting regional integration. David Mitrani, the most prominent proponent of the functionalist school of thought, is accredited with fashioning this alternative view of international politics in response to the security conflict conception of the realist and neo-realist scholars. Mitrani argues the greater interdependence in the form of transnational ties between countries could lead to peace. He is of tile view that cooperation should be arranged by the technical experts and not by politicians. Some of the other important functionalists like Joseph Nye, Ernst Haas, J.P. Sewell, Paul Taylor, A.G.R. Groom, John Burton, and Christopher Mitchell have immensely contributed to the functionalist tradition of international relation theory. In contrast to the functionalist theory, which seek to create a new world order in which the sovereign state take a back seat, neo-functionalism or the integration theory seeks to create new states through the integration of the existing states. This is achieved initially at the regional level, eventually culminating in the long run in the creation of a single world state. The idea that integration between states is possible if the political process of spillover facilitates it is basically drawn from the experience of European Union. The neo-functionalists thus prefer the emphasized cooperative decision-making process and elite attitude in order to assess the process towards integration. Ernst, Ernst Haas is considered to be the chief proponent of the school of thought. Although Haas builds on Mitrani, he rejects the notion that technical matters can be separated from politics. Haas defines integration as the tendency towards the voluntary creation of larger political units, each of which self-consciously issues the use of force in the relation between the participating units and groups. Integration of Haas has to do with getting self-interested political elite to intensify their cooperation. Realism. The theory of realism emphasizes the state's interest, particularly preference for integration, are influenced by their standings in the global power structure. Therefore, what matters is not the characteristics of societal groups, characteristics of states, or commonalities across nations. The position of the state in the global power structure, on the other hand, is important. However, when governments enlist in a regional union, they do make a long term commitment to collaboration with stable membership. As a result, the realists contend that the fact that the founding member states of European Economic Community were also NATO members during the Cold War favored deep integration with Europe. Liberal intergovernmentalism. Liberal intergovernmentalism advocates place nation states at the focus of their analysis. In contrast to neo-functionalism supporters who base their theory on the transnational society and supranational institutions, to then the domestic political system is used to channel the power of economic and social interest groups. Aggregation of interest, intergovernmental negotiations, and decision enforcement are essential. Then the international negotiating platform. National leaders must represent societal interests as well as their own and bargain for advantageous outcomes that will satisfy both their international counterparts and home constituencies. As opposed to the neo-functionalist approach, the introduction of states representing both their own institutional interests as well as their interest of their constituents, as emphasized by the liberal intergovernmental, provides a more accurate picture of regional integration than one exclusively based on social forces and supranational entrepreneurs. Constructivism. The philosophy of constructivism, which is mostly restricted to Western Europe, is centered more on the influence of ideas, conventions, and identities that on tangible aspects in the integration process. It is believed that human cognition, ideas, and agencies for are essential to the justification of the global system. The constructivists contend that standards are only limitations that become an integral part of actors. Constructivism serves as a sort of link between the conceptual, physical, and institutional worlds. It enables a deeper comprehension of how and why the integration process operates, and in doing so, creates a point of convergence with rational decision analysis. A major drawback of the constructivist approach is that, unlike the aforementioned theories, such as realism and intergovernmentalism, it has not yet reached a stage of shared theoretical principles or common research strategies. Briefly explain the motives and the methods adopted by the terrorists to perpetuate violence. Motives of terrorist groups. The use of terrorism is a strategy by the weak against the strong. Thus, terrorism may occasionally be committed by a political or social minorities. Because of the great variety of terrorist groups, goals, strategies, and membership, it is challenging to identify them. Generally speaking, terrorists are characterized as organizations that employ violence or threats to advance their political goals, usually in opposition to the governments in question. Terrorism was known in ancient times as seen as assassination of tyrants in ancient Greece and Rome, as well as by the zealots of Palestine and Hashashim of medieval Islam, said Kegley Jr. and Witkoff. The trace who traced the history of terrorism. Terrorism was linked to anarchist bombings as well as killings and property destruction by nationalist parties like Armenian and Turkish ones in 19th century. The author cited above content that terrorism is a method that has flourished in modern times as a result of this history. The religious, ethnic, and political movements and minorities who are currently engaged in terrorism seek to obtain the benefits of majority through violence, as well as to exact revenge and retaliation against those states and majority population who the terrorist groups perceive as oppressors. They claim terrorist organizations desire the freedom, privilege, and property that they believe they have been denied through persecution. It should be noted, nevertheless, that sometimes their perspective may not be accurate. While approximately 20% of worldwide terrorist attacks in 1995 were motivated by the religious fanaticism, independence, and statehood that are main objectives of the majority of terrorist organizations. The International Homeless label is supposedly applied to several terrorists. However, it would be incorrect to assume that all groups have the same objectives or driving forces. Terrorist movements are more diverse than their commonalities suggest, despite the fact they frequently use violent tactics that traverse international borders. Methods of terrorists. All terrorist organizations use violence as their primary tactic. This presupposes various manifestations, and various organizations employ various techniques. Terrorist tactics have increasingly advanced from simple tools to cutting edge weapons and even lethal gases. They used and occasionally still do basic weaponry like homemade handguns and improvised explosives. In the past, terrorists only sought attentions, and most victims were only terrified rather than killed. Bombs were occasionally dropped purely for show with the obvious intention of sparking their lives of the innocent. But when the beginning of with the beginning of contemporary wave of terrorism in the West Asia since 1968, the terrorist groups have rapidly refined their methods and weapons. The 20th century brought about revolutionary change in the techniques and use of terrorism. Technologically upgradation have the terrorist a new mobility and lethality. Political movements of all shades of the political spectrum began to use such tactics. In fact, the totalitarian regimes of Nazi Germany under Adolf Hitler and Soviet under Stalin virtually adopted terrorism as their state policy, though they did not acknowledge it publicly. Techniques like torture and execution were used in these nations without any legal pers- repercussions to force people to terrified follow their laws and ideas. Unlike Stalin, Mao imposed a region of terror on a much larger scale. During the Khomeini era, Iran also went through the period of terror and counter-terror, which included widespread executions and mass killings. Similar to the United States, Spain too experienced various forms of terrorism, leftist violence, state sponsored violence, and so forth. A terrorist organization may choose soft targets or hard targets depending on its objectives and available sources. In some instances, people resort to shooting randomly in busy areas like markets or places of worship. For example, during the Khalistan agitation, killing of individual opponents was a common feature. At times, indiscriminate firing upon groups of people by modern weapons like AK-47, etc., resulted in murders of large number of innocent people. Bombs are now a key component of terrorism's arsenal. For instance, a car bomb attempt was unsuccessful made at the World Trade Center parking lot in 1993. It merely garnered the attention that the terrorists wanted to receive. In 1993, hundreds of innocent people were killed and countless more were injured in almost simultaneous serial bombings and the usage of the feared RDX in Bombay. The justification was the destruction of the contentious Ayodhya site, which some claimed that was the ancient Ram Mandir, and others said that was a mosque constructed by Emperor Babur. However, serial bombing was in fact a cruel act of terrorism regardless of provocation. Globalization. Globalization is known by other names too. Some of the globalization synonyms are proliferation, development, and growth. The effect of globalization have been immense on the world economy. Globalization as a process has made countries significantly succeed after its initiation and implementation. There was overall growth of countries in aspects like foreign investment in all the sectors of economy. It was a contribution that helped in the development of an economy of nation. The policy of globalization was introduced in India in 1991. Along with the liberation and privatization, its impact on the Indian economy has been massive. Globalization and the Indian economy have been interrelated as they are directly related. It has helped in the creation of jobs, attract foreign investment, and generate income in the economy. Along with the economic impact of globalization, it has impacted the culture of country too. Globalization is a process that has several advantages. It is a process that contributes significantly to the development and growth of nation. Here are some of the benefits of globalization. Employment. The establishment of special economic zones have increased the number of jobs available. There are export processing units established all over the world which have helped employ thousands of people. The multinational companies of the West have been providing employment opportunities to the people by outsourcing employees. Compensation. There has been an increase in the level and amount of payment compared to the domestic companies. The main reason for this is that domestic or home companies lack skill and knowledge compared to the multinational companies. An increase in compensation is leading to change in the management structure of the companies too. Of living. With the emergence of globalization, there has been change in the people's standard of living. The difference in the purchasing behavior of the people has increased the standards of living of people. Therefore, the evolution and development of business have raised the standards of living of people. Increased investment. Globalization has led to increase in the cross-border investment. This has led to the companies investing and opening branches in different countries across the globe. The increase in the investment across the borders has enhanced the welfare of both countries. Development of infrastructure. Technology advancement has helped improve the infrastructure of countries. With the help of technology, the countries are achieving overall development. Foreign exchange reserve. With the help of globalization, there is a constant flow of capital in the international financial flows. This capital flow helps countries build foreign exchange reserves. Critique of Orientalism. Edward Said's criticism of Orientalism generated a heated debate about the legitimacy of the claim of knowledge to truth and brought forth problems and representation in human sciences. It has also given birth to numerous responses and critiques attempting to redress the historical underrepresentation of minority and marginalized viewpoints in comparative studies. Said's history thesis of Orientalism is a starting point for post-colonial cultural theory which challenged the colonial and the nationalist history. The significance of Edward Said's Orientalism lies in the fact that it points towards the hitherto ignored area of colonialism, that is, the involvement of epistemic violence in the colonialism. Said's own work of identity construction underlies the passion behind Orientalism. The intellectual power of the book comes from its inspired and relentlessly focused analysis of way in which a variety of disciplines operated within certain coherent discursive limits, but the cultural and perhaps even emotional power of the book comes from its worldly immediacy, its production by a writer whose identity has been constructed in a part by this discourse, who still feels the effect of Orientalist knowledge. Passion can be confusing and unreflective element of an intellectual debate, and while the passion no doubt explains a great deal about the popularity of Orientalism, the refusal by many critics to take books wordliness, wordliness into account has tended to limit their perception of its significance. Orientalism is the best viewed and Foucaultian terms as a discourse, a manifestation of power or knowledge. Without examining Orientalism, a discourse says said. It is not possible to understand the enormously systematic discipline by which European culture was able to manage and even produce the Orient politically, sociologically, militarily, ideologically, scientifically, and imaginatively during the post Enlightenment period. Environmental approaches. Appraisal of the environment. Assessment of environmental conditions is prerequisite, prerequisite for initiation of any sustainable development project. The symbiotic relationship between local ecology, social structure, and economic conditions of area concerned should be taken into account. Biophysical conditions of any area is intricately intricately related with the economic order of the region, which in turn influence societal development. A thorough biophysical investigation helps assessment process. The assessment report recommends action plan. Only through action plan is implementation of project possible. Estimation of environmental impact. Environment and its positive use is a key factor for sustainable development. Negative impact on environment through unplanned development may mar sustainability as a whole. The development which creates complete social and environmental harmony is only classed as sustainable. To achieve this goal, identification of the major positive aspects and its optimum utilization and monitoring is necessary. Different ecological inputs, along with climate, soil, vegetation, and drainage resources, should be properly assessed and monitored, and how development process affects these natural systems should be critically examined. So, estimation of environmental impact is the study of interrelationship with natural systems and development process. Natural resource accounting. The famous Brundtland Commission 1987 set up the World Commission on Environment and Development in its report Our Common Future suggested. Thus, figuring profits from logging rarely takes full account of losses in future revenue incurred through degradation of the forest. Similar incomplete accounting occur in the exploitation of the other resources, especially in the case of resources that are not capitalized in enterprise or national accounts. Air, water, and soil. In all countries, rich or poor, economic development must take full account in its measurement of growth, of the improvement or deterioration in the stock of natural resources. Robert Repito, 1988, in his book Global Possible, tried to emphasize the need of the natural resource accounting. According to him, the natural resources like clean air, soil, water, forest, marine resources, and livestock deterioration and exhaustion is not taken into account when gross national product of a country is calculated. Government policies and economic outlook. The widening gap between poor and rich countries, inequality among individuals, massive trade, capital flow, and lack of uniformity in government policies hamper sustainability in development. The dearth of integrate coherent development policies lack the price incentives, awareness, and absence of information campaign may hamper sustainable development, seen in most of the underdeveloped nations. Feminist theory in international relations. Feminism is a broad term given to works of those scholars who have sought to bring gender concerns into the academic study of international politics and who have used feminist theory and sometimes queer theory to better understand global politics and international relations as a whole. In terms of international relation theory, a feminist approach is grouped in a broad category of theoretical approaches known as reflectivism, representing a divergence from approaches adhering to a rationalist outlook based on the premises of rational choice theory. Reflectivist approaches, which also include constructivism, post structuralism, and post colonialism, regard state identities and interests as continuously in flux so that norms and identity play as much as role in shaping policy as material interests. Feminist IR theory involves looking at how international politics affects and is affected by both men and women and also at how the core concepts that are employed within the discipline of IR, example war, security, etc., are themselves gendered. Feminist IR has not only considered itself the traditional focus of IR on states, wars, diplomacy, and security, but feminist IR scholars have also emphasized the importance of looking at how gender shapes the current global political economy. In this sense, there is no clear cut division between feminists working in IR and those working in the area of international politics economy. In regards to feminism in consciousness, when looking at gender issue in politics, in Cynthia Enloe's article Gender is Not Enough, The Need for Feminist Consciousness, Enloe explains how international relations need to include masculinity in the discussion on war, while also giving attention to issues surrounding women and girls. Marx's approach to international relations. Marxian approach to international relations is based upon the concept of proletariat, internationalism, anti-imperialism, self-determination, and peaceful coexistence. It believes in the onward march of international relations towards its logical and distant conclusion, end of capitalism, imperialism, unity of proletariat as one unity, and true internationalism. Martian view of international politics is identical with its view of politics, just as politics within a state involves a continuous struggle between two contending classes, the rich owners of mean of production and having monopoly over production, distribution and exchange, and the poor, the workers, the underdogs who suffer exploitation at the hands of the rich. Likewise, international politics is a struggle between the capitalist state and the victims of capitalistic exploitation, that is, the poor and the backward states. International relations involve the exploitation of the poor state by rich states through devices like imperialism and war. The end of this era is destined to come through the spread of socialism in all states. Workers' revolutions against the internal exploiters would convert the state to socialism, and then force of socialism would join hands to do away a capitalism at a global level. Finally, international relations would get established on the basis of socialist brotherhood of all. The workers of the world would then live together as equal participating members of international community free from exploitation. Features of Martian approach. Martian approach to international politics has following key features. Class struggle between the rich and poor states. The class struggle between two economic classes is historically and eternally a true fact. Each society is divided between two economic classes, the rich, that is, have the exploiters who own and use the material means of production for their selfish ends, and the poor, that is, have not and exploited classes of workers which toils and yet suffers all exploitation at the hands of the rich. Need to end the need to end imperialist exploitation in the international relations. The imperial bourgeois states are involved in a strife and struggle among themselves and yet are united in maintaining and extending their control over the poor and developing states. They are maintaining a sort of balance of power for preserving their system that suits them. The working class in these countries is not yet in a position to overthrow the capitalist rule either through the assertion of democratic instruments like election or through revolutionary means. Neocolonialism as a new hard reality of international relations. Presently, the capitalist bourgeois state are maintaining their power through neo-colonial control over the people of the third world countries. These constitute the exploiting classes in contemporary international relations. The other class is the working people and not only the industrial workers who are struggling hard to end exploitation. Interstate displacement. Interstate displacement refers to a forced migration of people across national borders. In international law, those displaced across national borders is subjected of interstate displacement are defined as refugees. Sri Lankan refugees in the Europe or the Vietnamese boat people in the USA are examples of the interstate dislocation. Until the 20th century, no universal standards existed for the protection of people. Most of the states towards which refugees headed barred entries to them. Out of this experience, the concept of refugee entered international law. The refugees' uncertain legal status made them a political problem. Their physical and economic condition caused human concern. Until the end of the First World War, no coordinate efforts were made to assist the protected refugees. It was only with the inception of the League of Nations at the end of the First World War that a beginning was made in assisting refugees in a coordinate manner. Refugee protection came to be regarded as an international problem that required international cooperation. In 1921, Fridtjof Nansen, 1921 to 1930, the Norwegian polar explorer, was appointed by the League of the Nations as the High Commissioner of Russian refugees. Nansen's good work was carried forward by the American High Commissioner James MacDonald, 1933 to 1935. MacDonald fought immigration restrictions across the globe to resettle Jewish refugees that fled Nazi persecution during Hitler's regime. In a short span of 2 years, he settled 80,000 refugees in Palestine and elsewhere. Later, the mandate of the High Commissioner was extended to Armenian, Syrian, Kurdish, Turkish, and German refugees. However, these were ad hoc arrangements to deal with specific refugee groups. Thank you guys for watching the video.